Today, we're going to be talking about a difficult topic known as MST, or military sexual trauma. This is something that is difficult for people to talk about, whether you're a victim or know someone who was. Take care of yourself. If you need to skip this video, please do. If you need to call us and see if we can help you with your case so that you don't have to do it alone, or even after you watch this video, just make sure that you're getting the care and the help and the support that you need. MST stands for military sexual trauma, and it's any sexual activity where a service member was involved against his or her own will. And it could be anywhere from being raped in service, or even experiencing sexual harassment, or if you witnessed someone else being assaulted, anything would fall within that range of MST. Remember that MST is not something that you claim the condition, what it is that you are suffering from that resulted from the MST. So MST is what caused the condition that you're suffering from, the condition that you would be claiming. One important thing to note is that with MST, there doesn't have to be an actual explicit act. A lot of times, if you were pressured into doing something, if there were threats, if you didn't comply, or if there was an implied favoritism, or if it was implied that you would receive better treatment for complying with these unwanted sexual advances, those all fall into the category of MST as well. The specific issue that we'll be looking at today is PTSD due to MST, and how MST PTSD claims differ from other types of PTSD claims. So remember that when you're trying to service connect PTSD, there are three components to service connecting a condition. You need your current diagnosis, you need something that happened in service that caused or led to that PTSD, and a nexus, or a link between the two provided by a doctor. In PTSD cases, there's usually what they refer to as the stressors. That's the thing that happened in service that caused your PTSD. Now, with PTSD claims, just like with other claims, you need to prove that this stressor happens. The VA won't just take your word for it and believe you. You need to provide some kind of proof. Now, there are certain situations with PTSD where the VA has more lenient standards in you being able to prove that event happened. For example, if you were in combat, if you can show that you were in combat and your stressor is consistent with the circumstances of your service, then the VA will concede that you experienced a traumatic event in service. And then you would just need to prove that you have a current diagnosis of PTSD, and you would still need that doctor's nexus link connecting the combat to your PTSD. The exception is if you experienced MST, the VA understands that a lot of times people don't report when MST happens. They don't report when they were assaulted or threatened or harassed. And so in that case, they will take other types of evidence as proof that the stressor happens. For example, if you have journal entries, if you requested to transfer either your military duty assignment or to transfer to another station or something like that, your work performance is something that they'll look at as well. So if you were performing well or even average, and all of a sudden there's a change in that performance, so you're receiving disciplinary action, or your evaluations have decreased, anything along those lines can be used to show that something happened to you in service. And if it's consistent with your stressor, your account of the stressor that happened, they would be willing to concede that you experienced MST in service and it caused PTSD. Some other examples: if you had substance abuse, have behavioral changes like depression, panic attacks, all those things can help point to what you experienced in service. So all of these different types of evidence that the VA will take into account are called markers. So they are things that help prove that your stressor happened. One way to help prove these markers is through buddy statements. So if you have someone that you served with who maybe they don't know what happened, maybe you didn't even tell them about it, but they can talk about the change that they saw, how you went from being friendly or outgoing or even just normal, and then all of a sudden you are depressed, you don't want to leave your room, you're not eating, or you're mean to people. Anyone that witnessed that if they can provide a buddy statement, that would suffice to show as a marker that you experienced MST in service. Other people that can provide buddy statements: family members. Again, you didn't even have to tell them what happened. If you did, have them say that in a statement. If you didn't, can they talk about changes that you saw from the time you went into service until you came out of service? Or even maybe if you went home at some point and they noticed that change that first time that you went home. Anything that can depict that difference in your behavior is going to help show that something happened to you in service, and you can point it to that MST. Some of the cases that I've seen through the years, I will tell you, journal entries is something that the VA specifically lists as something that they will take as evidence. I personally have not seen veterans who had journals in service and that we can point to, but we do rely on buddy statements a lot. So usually veterans' parents or people that served with them is really crucial. So again, it doesn't have to be someone who knows what happened to you, but I had one case where the veteran had a friend who something similar happened to her. So our veteran was abused by someone in service, by a superior officer. And then there was someone that she served with that she never told them about, but that person also experienced that same type of behavior. And so that helps show a pattern, show that what the veteran is saying is true because somebody else experienced it. So that's something that you can use to help prove the MST that happened in service. So when you're looking for behavioral changes in service, one thing that I have used before as a marker is significant weight gain or weight loss. So if you look at the entrance exam and you look at the veteran's weight there compared to the exit exam and you look at the weight, oftentimes significant weight loss or weight gain could be evidence of something traumatic that happened to the veteran in service. Now, obviously, you're always going to want to look for what additional changes you can point to. The more evidence you have, the better, obviously. But a lot of times you're looking for whatever proof or evidence you can find. And the idea is that the doctor is going to be the one who's best going to be able to know if what you experienced is likely to have resulted in whatever those behavioral changes were. One thing to keep in mind, I know that for veterans, it's often really difficult to talk about what happened. One thing that I suggest to my clients is a lot of times it's easier to write everything down than more so than talking about it. And a lot of times, if you have different CMP exams, you will likely have to tell the story to each CMP examiner. Instead, you can try writing down your stressor statement. So write down what happened, whatever you're comfortable with, and then you can use that to show the CMP examiner every time that you go. Remember, CMP examiners are all different. So some may be very supportive and understanding, may be aware of trauma and how to deal with it, but some may not. I have heard stories where in one particular case, an examiner asks the veteran why she didn't report what happened to her and was very judgmental about it. And that was obviously not an ideal scenario. That made her very upset. And so there is a way to report bad CMP examiners. We'll have another video coming up on that. But so that's just one example of sometimes those CMP exams are difficult. And so whatever you can do to make it easier for yourself, bring someone with you that can offer support. Again, have your statement written down beforehand so you don't have to talk about and rehash the whole thing over and over again. Because proving MST happened in service can often be difficult. Maybe there is nothing in your record that you can point to. Maybe you don't have family members alive anymore, or you don't talk to people that you served. You always want to keep in mind that there are other avenues for service connections. For example, don't forget about things like depression secondary to pain. You could have PTSD and depression at the same time. So if you have, for example, a back condition that's service connected, it's very likely that you have depression due to that as well. So don't get hung up and caught up on that, on proving specifically that MST happened. If there are other ways that can get you service connected, be open-minded to those. I know that oftentimes veterans really just want for the VA to acknowledge what happened to them. They want that validation from the VA, and you may not always get that. And I know that's hard and frustrating, but the idea is you're getting the compensation that you deserve. So if you're able to find another way to prove service connection, go with what you can, go with what you can prove, because again, odds are you're likely experiencing more than one mental health condition due to more than one issue. In that, by that same token, there could be multiple or different traumas that you experienced in service that have caused the PTSD that you're dealing with. Again, for example, let's say you did experience MST in service, but you may also be a combat veteran. Being in combat is something that's more straightforward to prove. And again, it's very likely that being in combat has also significantly contributed to the PTSD that you've experienced. At the same time, veterans often, or even just survivors of sexual assault or whatever the case may be, a lot of times the PTSD doesn't develop until later on in life. There may be something years down the road that triggers it. And be open to exploring different avenues and different traumas that happened, and don't be caught up in just proving this one thing that happened.